From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, live in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Chinese leader Xi Jinping meets National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Beijing. During their meeting, Xi tells Sullivan that Taiwan belongs to China. Russian air assault continues for a third consecutive day as Moscow fires long-range missiles at Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's hometown. The Ukrainian leader urges the West to send more air defense systems. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol reaffirms the trilateral security pact with Japan and the United States. Reassurances are made as both Tokyo and Washington will get new leadership in the months ahead. Intense rainfall kills at least 28 in the Indian state of Gujarat. This as authorities say flash floods have displaced over 24,000 people in the state. And troops from Haiti and Kenya launch a special joint operation against the armed gangs in Port-au-Prince. Around 400 troops have been deployed in neighborhoods that are being controlled by gangs. We begin in the Middle East. Amid an ongoing war in Gaza, Israel has now deployed hundreds of troops, tanks, and infantry fighting vehicles in the West Bank. The military operation has resulted in the deaths of at least 10 Palestinians, leaving several wounded. Israel also conducted airstrikes in the West Bank, calling it part of a counterterrorism operation. The Israeli offensive began late yesterday as tanks and bulldozers rolled into the West Bank. Israeli forces were seen actively operating in 4 cities in the northern West Bank, including Jenin, Tulkarm, Tubas and Nablus. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office described the military raid as a preemptive operation to safeguard Israel from any future attacks.
IDF forces began this counterterrorism operation in Jenin and Tulkarm. We are targeting armed terrorists from the air and the ground, dismantling explosives planted under the road and confiscating large quantities of weapons. Now, in Jenin, 3 armed terrorists who posed a threat to our forces were eliminated in an aerial strike. In Jenin and Tulkarm, our forces eliminated 2 more armed terrorists. We apprehended wanted suspects. We located and confiscated weapons, M16s, ammunition, and additional military equipment.
Now in Jenin, a city that has remained a major flashpoint, Israeli troops blocked all but one entry point as they set up security posts. The Israeli troops also carried out search and seizure raids in Jenin's refugee camp as fierce gun battles broke out. And the Palestinian Health Ministry said explosions could be heard all throughout the night. Several Palestinians were in fact shocked by the Israeli raid and said they hadn't seen a military operation of this scope and scale in the West Bank since the second Palestinian uprising, or Intifada, almost 2 decades ago.
What happened? There was a raid to the neighborhood by surprise. Before they raided, there were some young men near my house and they asked me for water to drink. I went to bring them a bottle of water. When I opened the door to give it to them, in seconds, very fast, we felt like something came down on us from the sky and there was an explosion. I was unaware of what is going on. When I put my hand on my chest, it was all shrapnel and in blood.
Now, Hamas has confirmed that Israeli forces killed at least 6 of its fighters in the West Bank raids. However, Israel says that all of the 10 people that were in fact killed in the raids were members of Hamas. As violence breaks out once again, the United Nations has accused Israel of hostilities towards the Palestinians, which risks sparking a major regional war.
A major operation by Israeli security forces in the occupied West Bank risks seriously deepening an already catastrophic situation. Israel, as the occupying power, must abide by its obligations under international law. The Israeli security forces' use of airstrikes and other military weapons and tactics violates human rights norms and standards.
Now, following the Israeli raid, the United States has imposed sanctions on Israeli settlers in the West Bank as violence intensifies against Palestinians. However, it remains to be seen whether the West Bank raids were a one-time operation or if Israel is planning to launch another major military offensive in the region. And here in the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, have begun their 2-day bus tour in battleground Georgia. The Democratic presidential candidate is scheduled to meet with supporters, campaign staff, small business owners, and voters on her road trip. The running mates dropped by a high school and gave a pep talk to students in a heartwarming gesture.
You are leaders. By the very fact that you all are here in this room, doing what you do at this incredible school, doing it as one big team, understanding all of the different parts that fit together to create a team. You are doing some of the best work any leader can do.
Now, as part of the bus tour, Vice President Harris and a running mate will sit down with CNN on Thursday night for their first major interview. Now, joint interviews by both members of the presidential ticket are not unusual. In fact, in 2008, President Barack Obama and his then running mate Joe Biden sat for an interview with 60 Minutes. Almost 8 years later, Democrat Hillary Clinton and her running mate Tim Kaine did the exact same thing. However, Thursday's interview comes at a time when Kamala Harris lags behind her rival in addressing the media, with Donald Trump already holding multiple press conferences this month. In fact, the Trump campaign slammed his opponent's decision to sit for a joint interview, claiming that Kamala Harris is not competent enough to do it on her own. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's running mate J.D. Vance is on the hot seat once again after previous videos of him mocking childless teachers went viral on social media. The resurfaced remarks have been making the rounds online and have even been shared by the Harris-Walz campaign. However, that didn't stop J.D. Vance from taking potshots at Vice President Harris and criticizing her for not doing her job as vice president in the last 3 years.
She stands before crowds like this and she'll say, without a hint of irony or a hint of shame, that on day one, my friend, she is going to tackle the affordability crisis that's affecting American families. And on day one, she's going to make groceries more affordable. And on day one, she is going to make it possible for young people to afford a home. And every single person with an ounce of sense is saying, well, Kamala, day one was 1,300 days ago. What the hell have you been doing all the time?
Now, as Vice President Harris and Donald Trump prepare for their debate on September 10th, latest polls show that the Democrat has taken a lead over her Republican opponent. National polls from YouGov, Big Village, Qantas, and Morning Consult show the Democrat in the lead, while even Fox News shows Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump in key battleground states. With the head-to-head matchup becoming more heated by the day, the United States is preparing for a historic and dramatic conclusion. And moving to South America, where a dramatic showdown between tech billionaire Elon Musk and Brazil's judiciary is escalating. The South American nation's Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes has now ordered social media platform X to appoint a legal representative in Brazil within 24 hours or face a shutdown of its operations. The ultimatum issued on Wednesday is the latest move in an ongoing battle between Musk and Justice de Moraes, who has frequently clashed with X over content moderation and misinformation. Earlier this month, X announced that it would shut down its Brazilian operations immediately, citing censorship orders from Brazil's High Court. But the social media platform claimed that Damares has secretly threatened one of its representatives with arrest if X did not comply with legal demands to remove certain content.
Freedom of speech is not freedom of aggression. Freedom of speech is not freedom to destruct democracy, institutions, dignity, and others' honor. Freedom of speech is not freedom to spread hate speech and prejudice.
The social media platform then shared images of a document purportedly signed by Damares indicating that failure to comply could result in a daily fine of approximately $3,600 and the potential arrest of its representative. Additionally, the justice had even directed X to block accounts accused of disseminating fake news and hate speech during former President Jair Bolsonaro's administration. Musk, however, publicly denounced these actions as unconstitutional and a violation of free speech. Being vocal in his criticism of the judge, Musk described him as an utter disgrace to justice and went on to accuse him of demanding secret censorship and private information handover. As of now, Brazil's Supreme Court has not commented on the authenticity of the documents shared by X or the alleged threats against its representatives. But as the legal standoff continues to unfold, it's become clear X, and by extension Elon Musk, is ready to take on the entire Brazilian government. And now turning to China, despite Beijing's denials of alleged human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims and other ethnic minorities in the Xinjiang region, the United Nations says it now has proof of the atrocities. In turn, China has warned that the UN must avoid being used by Western political forces. However, after the wolf warrior-style diplomatic attack, China has agreed to engage with the UN human rights body on Xinjiang, but not without certain conditions. Our next report goes into detail.
2 years ago, the United Nations released a groundbreaking report. A report that accused China of potential crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. The report was published just before former UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet left office. It urged Beijing to reverse its policies targeting Uyghurs and other ethnic Muslims. These policies included mass detentions, forced labor, and political indoctrination, with evidence drawn from satellite images, leaked documents, and eyewitness testimonies. On Wednesday, the UN Human Rights Office said little has changed since the report came out in 2022. Spokeswoman Ravina Shamdasani revealed that many of the controversial laws and policies in Xinjiang remain intact despite ongoing dialogue. And in response, the Chinese authorities called on the Human Rights Office to avoid being used by political forces that aim to contain and smear China.
China is ready to have constructive exchanges and cooperation with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights based on mutual respect. We believe the office should also perform duty impartially and objectively, respect all countries' sovereignty, respect objective facts, work together with other countries to conduct constructive dialogue and cooperation, reject acts that politicize human rights or stoke division and confrontation, and avoid being used by political forces that aim to contain and smear China.
The OHCHR has faced significant challenges in its work with China. When the team visited the country in June, Shamdasani noted that allegations of human rights violations, including torture, still needed full investigation. In the face of international scrutiny, China has consistently denied these accusations. Yet the United States and the European Union have taken action by introducing laws to combat the import of goods made with forced labor from Xinjiang.
China always puts the people front and center in all our work, views respecting and protecting human rights as an important part of governance, and has made historic achievements in this aspect. The Chinese people now enjoy a growing sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security. This is a simple fact that anyone without bias can see. People of all ethnic groups in China are equal and their legitimate rights and interests are fully protected. Xinjiang today enjoys social stability and economic growth, and the people there live a happy life. It is at its best in history, where people of all ethnic groups are working together for a better life.
Despite this, the EU's imports of products made in Xinjiang surged by over 217% in the beginning of this year compared to the previous year, highlighting the complexities of enforcing such bans. While the total value of these shipments was calculated at around $312 million, it represented a huge increase of $98 million from last year.
China's cooperation with island countries in various fields, including police affairs and law enforcement, is normal cooperation between sovereign countries in line with international law and practice. It doesn't target third parties, nor should it be subject to other parties.
And not just Chinese goods. Sanctions have also been imposed on Chinese officials linked to abuses in Xinjiang. Uyghur activists, while appreciative of the UN's continued pressure, remain frustrated by China's lack of compliance with OHCHR recommendations. Rehan Asad, an Uyghur human rights lawyer whose brother spent 3 years in solitary confinement in Xinjiang, expressed disappointment at the limited progress. As the international community watches closely, the struggle for human rights in Xinjiang continues, with no clear end in sight.
And our last story is about the future of men. The Y chromosome, responsible for determining the male sex in humans, is slowly disappearing due to evolutionary changes. Over millions of years, it's lost most of its genes, leaving only a handful of functional ones. The degeneration has scientists wondering if the Y chromosome might eventually vanish, leaving the future of men hanging by a genetic thread. Our final report explains this growing anomaly.
For ages, men and women have been the dynamic duo, the bread and butter, the yin and yang of society. Essential cogs in the grand machine of human existence. But it looks like men might just be disappearing from the equation altogether. And no, this isn't some wild dystopian sci-fi plot twist. It's all down to those little genetic building blocks called chromosomes. Let's rewind for those who might have snoozed through their biology class. Humans have chromosomes that determine their biological sex. Women have a pair of X chromosomes, while men get an X and a Y chromosome. Now a new study is waving a red flag, suggesting that the Y chromosome is disappearing at a rapid rate. It's degenerating, and at this rate, it might just poof out of existence someday altogether. So what's causing the Y chromosome to pack its bags? Well, it's evolution. Over the last 166 million years, the Y chromosome has lost about 1,600 genes. This is at a rate of nearly 10 genes per million years. But now it's down to an estimated measly number of 55 to 56. And only 27 of those are actually pulling their weight of what makes a man a man. While men have long enjoyed the perks of patriarchy, their genes are not quite as lucky. The X and Y chromosomes were once the same size, a perfect genetic pair. But because men only have one of each, there's no backup plan when things go south. No genetic recombination to fix what's broken. Thus, the damaged gene mutations remain in their bodies. As a result, Y chromosomal genes have been quietly getting wiped out, leaving women's two sturdy X chromosomes smugly intact. So, does this mean we're heading towards a manless future? Yes, but not so fast. Before women start drafting goodbye texts to the male species, there's a glimmer of hope. A recent study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in the United States found that the spiny rat, a critter native to Japan, managed to evolve a brand new male-determining gene after its Y chromosome called it quits. This evolutionary sleight of hand could mean that mammals, including humans, might develop alternative sex-determining mechanisms if the Y chromosome disappears. So, while the Y chromosome's future might seem as shaky as a Jenga tower, evolution does have a knack for throwing them some building blocks. the disappearing Y chromosome might just make way for a new gene to step up and save the day for men, ensuring that they don't vanish from the face of the earth anytime soon. But who knows? Maybe it's time to start appreciating those little Ys while we still can.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired.
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.